Hey everyone, how's it going? Hey everybody, thanks for joining. Hi everyone, happy snow day. I hope everyone's been able to kind of take today, at least if you're in the Northeast, at least if you're in New York. We've had a ton of snow come down over the last couple days. Hey everybody, how's it going? Oh my gosh, all these little waves. Hi Adhikar. Hi Dr. Heather. Hi everyone. Hey everybody. Someone said, how's Deco in the snow? He's loving, Dan Price asked, how's Deco in the snow? He's loving it. We got Deco last January actually. You know, he got a little bit of snow experience when he was a little puppy, but he has way more now. So he's loving it. Hi, everybody. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining. So I'm hopping on live today to talk about what happened at the Capitol. And I want to just say a couple of things in advance. One is that, first of all, I am sorry if this live is like very wide-reaching. It's not my intent to ramble, but a lot went on and a lot led up to what went on. And I think it's important to talk about it. So, you know, that's first things first, is that thanks for your patience as I try to communicate this story to you in advance. Secondly, you know, I think it's important for me to say that my story is one of many stories of what happened in the Capitol. There were food service workers that were afraid for their lives. There were custodial workers that had to clean up after the just wreckage of white supremacists, and many of those workers were Black and brown and immigrant, then put in through the experience of having to clean up for white supremacists, clean up after the mess of white supremacists. There were other members of Congress, there were staffers, there were children. And so all of this is to say is that my story is just one story. It's not the only story, nor is it anywhere close to the central story. But the reason why I think it's important to share is because so many of the people who helped perpetrate and who take responsibility for what happened in the Capitol are trying to tell us all to move on. And they're trying to tell us to forget about what happened. They're trying to tell us that it wasn't a big deal. They're trying to tell us to move on without any accountability, without any truth-telling, or without actually confronting the extreme damage, physical harm, loss of life, and trauma that was inflicted on not just me as a person, not just other people as individuals, but on all of us as a collective and on many other people. And that we cannot move on without accountability. We cannot heal without accountability. And so all of these people who want to tell us to move on are doing so at their own convenience. The other thing that I want to say is that to friends and loved ones close to me, I want to apologize to them in advance. Sorry if my voice is shaking, but if you are learning things about me in the course of this live that you didn't know before, and it's not, you know, a thing about hiding or anything like that, but sometimes you just can't tell the same story over and over. So anyways, the reason I say this and the reason I'm getting emotional in this moment is because these folks who tell us to move on, that it's not a big deal, that we should forget what's happened, or even telling us to apologize, these are the same tactics of abusers. And I'm a survivor of sexual assault. And I haven't told many people that in my life. But when we go through trauma compounds on each other. And so whether you had a negligent or, a neglectful parent, or whether you had someone who was verbally abusive to you, whether you are a survivor of abuse, whether you experience any sort of trauma in your life, small to large, these episodes can compound on one another. There's no, something really big happening to you, and then you deal with it, and then you move on, and then when something else happens to you, you deal with that, and then you move on. All of our experiences make us who we are. And that's also to say that most people live with trauma. And and that doesn't even diminish, any of the trauma that any one of us may have been through. But it is to say that there is a community of so many people who can understand. So when I see a party who cheered on violence that killed 5, maybe now 6 people, a second Capitol Police officer took their life in the aftermath of the attack this past week. When we are still losing people, when we don't know how many people are going to develop PTSD after what happened, when we don't know how many people are still hospitalized. I mean, there are people who, sure, they may not have passed away, but they lost fingers, they lost eyes. And these people are just trying to tell us it's not a big deal. And they're trying to say, you're making too big a deal over it. These are the tactics of abusers. Or rather, these are the tactics that abusers use. And so when I see this happen, how I feel and how I felt was not again. I'm not going to let this happen again. I'm not going to let it happen to me again. I'm not going to let it happen to the other people who've been victimized by this situation again. And I'm not going to let this happen to our country. Ever. I'm not going to let it happen. And so, as I said, as I've kind of said earlier, is that the other reason why I've hesitated to tell this story has to do with some of that trauma. As a survivor, I struggle with the idea of being believed. The reason why I think it's important for us to hold this to account is that because we know that if we do not hold people accountable, what they're asking for when they say, can we just move on, is that what they are asking is, can we just forget this happened so that I can do it again without recourse? And that's what these folks are asking. The folks who are saying we should move on, we shouldn't have accountability, etc., are saying, can you just forget about this so that we can, do it again? They've had almost a month. They have doubled down, and they said, I did the right thing. And if I could go back, I would do it all over again. So that tells me that these people remain a present danger. Because what that tells me is that when given another window of political opportunity for themselves, even if they know that it means that it will endanger their colleagues, they will do it again. And that's the real reason why I think that Senator Josh Hawley needs to resign, why Senator Ted Cruz needs to resign, along with many others, because they will do it again. Now let's move on to the story. And so I get to my office, I don't know, 9:30. We were running a little behind. I don't know, like around 9:30 or so. And we head there, and I'm in my office like multiple hours before we really need to be in my office, because that's just what Capitol Police leadership told us to do. Some timestamps for you all. This is probably happening around noon. And the clashes started happening around 1:20 p.m. So now we're on like this TikTok, okay? So the clashes would have started happening that day around 1:20 p.m. And my chief of staff calls. Now this is around 12:45 p.m. So my chief of staff calls me and asks me, hey, how are you feeling? And I told her, I'm feeling great. I'm feeling amazing, because Reverend Warnock and John Ossoff had just won the election the night before. And I was feeling sick to my stomach on Monday, and even worse on Tuesday, about Wednesday. It just felt like this tension was just, I thought I was gonna really throw up. I felt so scared the 2 days before that about what was going to happen on Wednesday. And then when John Ossoff and Reverend Warnock won that election, I felt like it had just taken a weight off of all of our shoulders. And it was just an outcome that was just beyond our wildest dreams. And so when she said, how are you feeling? I said, I'm feeling amazing. And part of me even naively felt like maybe that will take the wind out of these people's sails a little bit, because the Senate is ours. The Senate belongs to the people now, and the Senate has been won. And so I was feeling great. And so that conversation lasts about 15 minutes. So that takes us to about 1:01 p.m. And I go back to scrolling through lunch options for what we're going to order, when all of a sudden I hear boom, 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 boom on my door. And then I hear these huge, violent bangs on my door, and then every door going into my office. Just bang, bang. Oh, shoot. See, look, I'm banging over again. Bang, 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 bang. Like someone was trying to break the door down. And so basically I go into the back, and there's a bathroom, and then there's a closet. And I jump into the bathroom, and I immediately realized that I shouldn't have gone into the bathroom. I should have jumped in the closet. And so I open the door, when all of a sudden I hear that whoever was trying to get inside got into my office. And then I realized that it's too late. That it's too late for me to get into the closet. And so I tried to I go back in, and I hide back in the bathroom behind the door. And then I just start to hear these yells of, where is she? Where is she? And I just thought to myself, they got inside. And so I hide behind my door like this, like I'm here, and the bathroom door starts going like this, like the bathroom door is behind me, or rather in front of me, and I'm like this, and the door hinges right here, and I just hear, "Where is she? Where is she?" And this was the moment where I thought everything was over. And the weird thing about moments like these is that you lose all sense of time. In retrospect, maybe it was 4 seconds, maybe it was 5 seconds, maybe it was 10 seconds, maybe it was 1 second, I don't know. It felt like my brain was able to have so many thoughts in that moment, between these screams and these yells of, "Where is she? Where is she?" And so I go down and I thought I was going to die. And I had a lot of thoughts. You have a lot of thoughts, I think, when you're in a situation like that. And like also one of those thoughts that I had was, I just happened to, be a spiritual person and be raised in that context. And I really just felt like, if this is the plan for me, then people will be able to take it from here. I had a lot of thoughts, but that was the thought that I had about you all. I felt that if this was the journey that my life was taking, that I felt that things were going to be okay. And that, I had fulfilled my purpose. Anyways, sorry guys. So anyways, as I'm hiding in this bathroom, hearing these yells of these men, or just just one man going, "Where is she? Where is she?" I start to look through the door hinge to see if I can see anything. And there's like a door here and there's like another door here. So I'm like trying to look through two door hinges. And so I look through this door hinge and I see this white man in a black beanie just like open the door of my personal office and come inside the personal office and yell again, "Where is she?" And I have never been quieter in my entire life. I was just, I don't even know if I held my breath, but I was just, here behind there, and I just start sliding down. And then all of a sudden I hear my staffer G yell out. And he's like, hey, it's okay. Come out. So I'm like, I don't know, so deeply rattled. I'm still processing the end of my life when I come out. And I come out, and this man is a Capitol Police officer. But the story doesn't end. It's a Capitol Police officer. There was no partner, was not yelling, Capitol Police, etc., etc. But then it didn't feel right. Because he was looking at me with a tremendous amount of anger and hostility. And things weren't adding up. Like, there was no partner there. And no one was yelling. He wasn't yelling like, this is Capitol Police, this is Capitol Police. And he was looking at me in all of this anger and hostility. And at first, you know, in my brain and in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, I just came from this super intense experience just now. Maybe I'm reading into this, right? Like maybe I'm projecting, like something onto him that like maybe I'm just seeing anger, but maybe he's not trying to be angry. But I talked to G, my legislative director, after the fact, and he said, no, I didn't know if he was there to help us or hurt us either. And G was actually like, this man came with so much hostility that G was sizing him up and didn't know if he was going to have to fight him. Like that is how like aggressive the situation was in that moment. And we couldn't even tell, we couldn't read if like this was a good situation or a bad situation. It was so like, you know, like so many other communities in this country, like just that presence doesn't necessarily give you a clear signal if you're safe or not. And so the situation did not feel okay. And then he just looks at me and yells at me, and he just go down and then go to this other building. And anyway, so we start running down this spiral staircase to the first floor. And we get to the first floor and we hear the yells getting louder and louder, like, rah, 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 you know, just like I hear like the hinges cracking, you know, it just feels like you can hear all of this yelling and screaming. And as we're going down the spiral staircase closer to the street level, like the yells only get louder and louder and louder that you hear. And so we run to this member's office and I start knocking on the door. I start banging on it. And like at this point, no one is in any of the hallways and we're completely alone. And so I start banging on this door and I said, it's okay, it's me, let me in. And they may not have heard me or something like that. I call them, and you know, all of this is, I don't know, maybe happening in 30 seconds, 60 seconds. It's really hard to kind of attest to the passage of time, but it happened so fast and I just like couldn't get through immediately. So I realized that I had actually passed by Katie Porter's office. And so I run back, and I knock on the door and I'm just like, bang, 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 bang. And she opens and I'm like, hey, Katie, can I shelter with you right now? And Katie's like, yeah, of course. Come on in. Like, yeah, come on. And so we go into her office and I'm at like a 10, right? Like I am at a full 10, fight or flight, thought I was going to die like 10 minutes ago, then thought I was going to die again, because I have to tell you that when I was banging on this door, I had thought, fully expected that by this point the building had been breached and there were people walking the hallways. Like this was what I had fully expected to be having been gone on in that moment. And so when we're outside in this hallway alone, I'm banging on this door and I'm thinking, and I'm fully expecting one of these insurrectionists to turn the corner with a gun and that it would be over again. I'm fully just like bracing for impact for these people to breach the perimeter of our building. And so many things happen in this period when we were sheltering together. And like all these crazy thoughts go through your mind. And even like just racially, even, you know, Katie and I were having these conversations and it's like, it like where you feel like we as members, our nameplates are next to our offices. And it's like, are some offices safer than others because they have white sounding names or because they have male sounding names, or like who would be safer to hide in because you would expect them least in that office, you know, like all these crazy things that you're thinking. It's like, this is what it's come to. And so we were sheltering in there for a long time, making all these contingency plans. And we turned off all the lights because I was afraid that, it's January in Washington, D.C. The sun sets mad early. It's like 3:45 and the sun is already setting. And so I'm like, we got to turn off all the lights, because if they see the offices with the lights on, like, who knows if they target that. At this point, we start getting intelligence that bombs have been found. One about like 1 block away from where we were, 1 or 2 blocks away from where we were, and then a second one like 3 blocks away from where we were. And so I'm also fully expecting, or maybe not expecting, but I'm wondering, like, or feeling or preparing for one of the wings of the building to explode, because we had gotten intelligence that there were bombs found very close to where we were. And so we're sheltering, and I'm thinking, what do we do if the building explodes? What do we do if this happens? What do we do if they break into this office that we're in? And, through all of this, what also felt crazy traumatizing is just feeling like there were people that were willing to do what they needed to do. The incredibly brave staffers that were with us, G and Katie staffers, and others that were with us, and that they were making decisions to put themselves between us and any potential danger that would break into that room. And you really struggle with that, because those aren't your decisions, and you don't want anyone to do that. But people say, no, I'm going to do this. And you really sit with that, with the weight of that. We had these emergency hoods, and I find out later, when we start getting these emergency announcements, that when they were evacuating our building earlier that day, we were supposed to take our emergency hoods with us. It's a long story. Point is that they're emergency supplies. We were supposed to take our emergency supplies with us, and that Capitol police officer didn't tell us anything about that. He didn't tell us, bring your hoods. He didn't tell us do this. He didn't tell us do that. And what's really weird in the aftermath of that situation is that after you see the videos, after you hear about what happened with Capitol Police leadership, after you know that leadership knew about the threats of violence and didn't prepare adequately for it, you start thinking back at all of these things. And, I think about that officer and just the uncertainty. Did he not say that he was Capitol Police on purpose? Did he lose himself in that moment? Did he not give us the extraction point location because he forgot? Or was he trying to actually put us in a vulnerable, situation? Just the very uncertainty that you don't know if that person was actually trying to protect you or not is already deeply unsettling. And, I'm not here to say I'm not here to pass judgment on any one individual or on any one officer or this, that, and the other, and a lot of Republicans mischaracterize my position, and Fox News amplifies a lot of these lies, which in turn leads to a lot of violent threats. And I could do a whole other IG live on other times that I thought I was going to die. And I tend to deal with things as well with humor and dark humor. And it was like one of the things I was telling my staff that day was like, well, at least this isn't the first time I thought I was going to die in my first term. But it's that lack of trust that creates so much volatility and fear. And so it's like I look back on this memory and I remember trying to excavate like every shred of evidence to be like, it was just a tough situation. But you just don't know. You just don't know. And so, it's an intense situation. So anyways, there's a lot more details in this time that I was barricaded with Katie Porter. But I don't want to belabor it. And I also don't know which of these details quite yet are okay to share and which aren't. But the point of the situation was that we felt completely unsafe. And eventually we did find the extraction point. We did find out what the extraction point was, and we found out that all the members of Congress were being directed to this one point. And with the amount of uncertainty in this situation, I just felt like I'm not going there. Like, there were members who were live tweeting the location of the speaker that were probably going to be in that extraction point. There was still uncertainty about whether there were still bombs throughout the city. It just legitimately did not feel safe. And so, at first I was like, there's no way that I'm going there. And so we stayed in that room. And, the other fear in the situation too is, where was the National Guard? And at the time, now we know more stories about this, but at the time, National Guard wasn't called. And I was starting to get just this feeling in my gut that, like, in any other situation like this, they would be called, they would be here. And they're not coming. And we didn't know if they were being held off or what, but in the event that the National Guard didn't come, it was just a matter of time before the building got breached. And the sun was setting, and in that darkness, things could even get more violent. And so we were just, we didn't know what was going to happen. And so we were probably barricaded in that building, in that room together, I don't even know how many hours, 5 hours or so, when finally we were able to get out. And we decided that while we weren't going to stay at the extraction point, we would kind of check in to let them know that, where our physical whereabouts were. But also, this is why I wasn't tweeting that day. Ultimately, we made the decision, and leadership and, folks made the decision that we were sent here to do our duty, and our duty was to certify the results. And that's what we're here to do. And no amount of insurrectionists are going to divert us from that central task of upholding our democracy. But then we had people who still want to challenge the results. And so at this point, there were still going to be quite more votes because there were people still trying to delay and challenge the election results after multiple people had died in the violence of the insurrection. So that meant that we had to wait. And so with the building feeling more secured in that moment, I walked over to my sis, Ayanna Presley's office. We were there, and I stayed in Ayanna's office, and Katie was there, and I told Ayanna what had happened to me in my office. And so we stayed in Ayanna's office, and we were there until about 4 o'clock in the morning. There's other details too. I'm just like not ready for that right now. But yeah, you know, and I stayed with Ayanna, and it was when I told the story to Representative Presley, she told me right away, like, that what you experienced was traumatizing and you need to take care of yourself. And it was like having her as a friend and a sister hear what I was saying and tell me that mentally, it forced me to pump my brakes and be like, oh. So, you know, I think it was so important. And I think for so many people out there, if you have experienced any sort of trauma, like just the fact of like recognizing that and admitting it is already a huge step. Especially in a world where people are constantly trying to tell you that you didn't experience what you experienced, or that you're lying, or that, you know, those are additional traumas on top of what you've already experienced, right? If you are a survivor of abuse, of neglect, of verbal abuse, of sexual assault, you know, etc. There's the trauma of going through what you went through. And then there's the trauma afterwards of people not believing you, or trying to publicly humiliate you, or trying to embarrass you. And that also gets internalized too, because a lot of times you don't want to believe it either. You don't want to think that that happened to you. You don't want to think that X person hurt you. You don't want to admit that you were a person who has been abused, assaulted, etc. Because you don't want to be like a victim, right? And so there's the doubt that the world puts on you, that bad actors puts on you, that perpetrators put on you, that abuse puts on you. And then there's the doubt that you put on yourself. And so the moment a person actually admits, like, no, this thing happened to me, and they're willing to say that to themselves, I think is also a really important first step. And, you know, I look back on that, and she really helped my healing. Because right in the moment, if you're able to do that, you're not extending that time period where you're like reacting in a weird way. You don't know why. You think you can just move on. It wasn't a big deal, you know. And even in the aftermath of this whole situation, I have had to check my own thoughts. You know, part of me is like, maybe I shouldn't share this because it's not a big. Maybe it's not that it's not a big deal, but like it's not important to the central story of the insurrection, or that like people are gonna say that, oh, she's just trying to make it about her, and like all of those, you know, normal nagging thoughts. And like I said, like all of your traumas can kind of intersect and interact. And so, you know, I think that being able to recognize that early, and in the aftermath of the attack, Congress had counselors come in and advise members, especially those who had kind of survived those like initial, like some of those direct encounters on the House floor. And, you know, one of the things that I had heard and that I had remembered people talk about with trauma is that, like, tell your story. Like, it's an actual cognitively important thing to do, is to tell the story of what happened to you. And then sometimes you just say it a lot and tell it over and over and over again. And that can be a tool for helping a person with healing in all traumas. And so, you know, again, just like I said at the very beginning of this, like, my story is not the only story, nor is it the central story. It's one of many stories of what these people did in creating this environment. And these folks who are just trying to tell us to move on are just like pulling the page. They're using the same tactics of every other abuser who just tells you to move on, of that man who touched you inappropriately at work telling you to move on. Are they going to believe you? Or the adult who, you know, if they hurt you when you were a child and you grow up and you confront them about it and they try to tell you that what happened never happened. Or, you know, the countless people who tell women and non-binary people that, you know, they're constantly trying to get attention just for existing and just for saying that they exist. Like, these are the tactics of abusers. And this is at a point where it's not about the difference of, this is not about a difference of political opinion. This is about just like basic humanity. And that's what these people don't get, because they have shown that, you know, we knew that violence was expected on the 6th. We knew that violence was predicated on someone telling the lie, the big lie about our elections. We knew all of this in advance. We knew that violence was planned for the 6th. We knew that violence depended on the lie, on someone upholding the lie that our elections were fraudulent. Lies that Republican secretaries of state said were a lie. Republicans had said it was a lie. Republican governors had said it was a lie, you know, etc. So we knew in advance that violence was planned. We knew that violence needed someone to tell the lie. And these senators, Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley, knew that it was the lie. And they knew that these violent people needed the lie. And they chose, because they thought it would be politically advantageous to them, they chose to tell the lie. All of these things were known in advance. And then 5, 6 people have lost their lives. Others have lost eyes, limbs. Many more have been traumatized. We need accountability, because the accountability is not about revenge. It's not about getting back at people. It's not about any of that. It's about creating safety. And we are not safe with people who hold positions of power, who are willing to endanger the lives of others if they think it will score them a political point. So, anyways, I think I've chatted a lot of your ears off. I will save this recording so you guys can watch it if it saves. Sometimes, you know, it bugs out and it doesn't let me. But I appreciate you all taking the time. In the time since, I have been giving myself time and space to try to heal from stuff. I know a lot of other members of Congress have been trying to take their space. And I think that these are important stories to tell. And I hope that I'm not, as I said, you know, my story isn't the only story. It's far from a central story. But together we have 435 stories. And we need to tell them, because every time a Republican gets on television and tries to say we need to move on and forget about it, they need to be reminded about what they're trying to absolve and excuse. And our stories can do that. And I hope that if you've experienced trauma in your life, I hope you know that you don't need to have experienced the worst thing or the biggest thing. If you experience something, talk to someone about it, acknowledge it in your heart, and I hope that you get the courage to do everything that you need to do to heal. So thank you all so much. Love you all. Big hugs. Happy snow day. And make a snowman for me. Bye-bye.